Is Justin Fields the greatest quarterback ever? Is Michigan the worst offense in history? And what to make of the Ohio State defense? All that and more coming up on the Unscripted Ohio podcast.
Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on BuckeyeGrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
We are the Unscripted Ohio podcast. All Buckeye fans enter here. We are here thanks to BuckeyeGrove.com as well as our title sponsor, JFQ Lending. Please, all of your mortgage and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye, so please check them out at jfqlending.com. Of course, we are also here with support from GoBus with over 40 stops across Ohio with popular destinations like the Hocking Hills, Mohican State Park, and Ohio's big cities. Please check them out at ridegobus.com or call them 1-888-95-GO-BUS. I'm your host, Kyle Lamb. We are here for another edition of the Unscripted Ohio podcast on the Unscripted Ohio Network. We're going to break down what happened over the weekend. Ohio State's 42-0 shellacking of the UC Bearcats. We'll talk about that. Justin Fields, the defense, how speedy they looked, how dominant the offensive line was. You know, J.K. Dobbins looking good again. It was a great performance for Ohio State. We'll get into that. Dive into some Michigan football. They've certainly got some offensive woes to talk about. Maybe a little LSU and Joey Burrow. But I didn't want to do this alone, so I called up my AAA star, my prospect, Johnny Lunsford from the Scarlet and Gray podcast. Johnny, how you doing, buddy?
Good. It's good to get called up to the big leagues.
Yeah, you got to like that paycheck, don't you? It's a little bit different than the AAA accommodations.
Well, we'll see if you actually deliver on that, but I'll believe it when I see it.
We don't offer guaranteed contracts here on the Unscripted Ohio Network. We're all about promises of future paydays.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I'm just doing it for the notoriety at this point, I guess. Maybe somebody else will pick me up. Well, you're officially a free agent.
Yeah, and you're climbing an uphill battle because you've got to fight off that perception of your co-host over there that basically just likes to stay silent and do nothing, and he's better when he does it that way.
Yeah, I see here on your resume you had frequent conversations with a Floridian. Yeah, say goodbye to my security clearance.
Well, think about Corey's resume. Well, I edited this, and that's my crowning achievement. You can't hear me, but this is me, I promise you.
Well, I will say he does that well, and I appreciate the shout-out you gave us on our Ode to Urban. He definitely, I think he claimed 6 hours of work for or 7 hours of work for those 6 minutes. And I can say that my enjoyment and everyone's enjoyment was certainly worth his time.
Well, he billed us for 6 hours, so maybe we got 1 hour of work out of him. No.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, though, yeah, the shout-out was well-deserved on both of your ends. You delivered a fantastic monologue, and his editing work was top-notch. So, yeah, kudos to that episode. If you guys are listening and wondering what we're talking about, and I hope you're not, I hope you already heard it, but go back to the Thursday Scarlet and Gray podcast, the Ode to Urban Meyer here on the Unscripted Ohio Network. You can find that on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. I'm hoping to get the podcast also on iHeartRadio very soon. Haven't heard about that, but should have a confirmation hopefully this week. But if you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to it. It's not time sensitive. It's well worth it. So I do encourage you to give that a listen. So, Johnny, Ohio State on Saturday. We, especially myself, I know you and Corey a little bit to a lesser extent, but I was really kind of expecting a little bit of a close call. And I thought, I predicted maybe a 14-point win for Ohio State. It's not that this was necessarily Cincinnati being the greatest team in the world. wasn't exactly overly impressed with their win against UCLA, wasn't exactly being negative about Ohio State. I just thought early in the season that we would see a physical, tough team come to town, and I thought that it would give Ohio State problems. As it turns out, boy, Ohio State made quick and easy work of UC.
Yeah, they really did, and I was definitely guilty. I think I called this 31 to 20, and that was more off of past record, playing discipline against UCLA, the win against UCLA, us being a young team. And I'm like you, I knew Luke Fickell. I knew he would teach the sound defense. And then there's a funny thing. I couldn't sleep Friday night, and I got up and I was like, you know what? I'll scout Cincinnati a little bit. Watching them in the 40-minute condensed clip on YouTube, I watched them against UCLA, and there's no emotion in that. It's not like watching a game live. And I was just like, wow, they're not that big and they're not that athletic and they're just not that scary anywhere. And then I thought, oh, maybe I should have done my score prediction. Oh, gee, I don't know, after watching the opponent. But, yeah, I still, even after watching that, I didn't expect a 42-point win.
It's amazing how you can take away the bathroom breaks and the popcorn and ordering pizza and all the stuff that goes into watching a 3.5-hour football game, and suddenly you lose all emotion.
Yeah, and not to mention, the 40-minute condensed, and it's just play. That literally all you see is the play. But it's definitely probably a much more sound way to analyze what you're seeing on the field.
There are a lot of things we can talk about and we'll talk about here on this episode to kind of recap, what happened on Saturday. But I will say this, the thing that stands out for me is Justin Fields looked like he jumped another level even in 1 week. His first week performance was impressive enough. He looked pretty crisp throwing the ball at times. He handled the pressure really well for the most part. There were a few blitzes where I thought he could have done better with the pickups. But all things considered, Justin Fields this week looked almost flawless. He only had 5 incompletions the entire game. 2 of those were intentional throwaways. He handled the blitz packages. The line kept him pretty clean and upright, but he handled the pressure as well as he could. Just the composure and the ability to run the offense, for me, is really impressive to see where he is at right now in his development.
Yeah, Kyle, I went back and I did a 40-minute rewatch, not paying real close attention in this game as well. I think I counted 1 misfire. 1. He threw it over Olave's
Chris
head.
Olave, yeah. I know exactly what play you're talking about.
That's amazing. I think his passer rating was 181 and some change. You hit the nail on the head. He looked like a good quarterback in week 1 who had some unpolished skill sets that he needed to improve on. Week 2 yesterday, he looked like we were in, I don't know, like he'd played 2 months of football in the last week. It was really a big jump. Now, granted, the O-line kept him really clean. I thought they did a really nice job of that. But the intermediate throws, everything was just – I don't know that I've seen a jump that big in 1 week ever.
I almost hate to use this term, but I even said on the second play of the game, Justin Fields – and I said it, tongue-in-cheek. It was half-joking, but there was some seriousness behind it. He had a swagger about him right at the very beginning of the game. The camera focused in on his face a couple times, and you could see this look on his face, this smile. The body language said it all. He looked comfortable right at the very start of this game. And if that is a status of where he is at as a quarterback right now, with still yet another year of eligibility at Ohio State ahead of him, that's a scary thought for the Big Ten and the rest of college football, because it's not often you see a true sophomore be that comfortable and that confident in his abilities that soon, especially when we're talking about transferring into a new system at a new school. And he just looked really confident in what he's doing out there.
Yeah, he really did. He didn't look stressed the whole time. Even after taking hits, he got right back up, completely unfazed. He didn't. It was so confident that even his celebrations were low key, just like he expected, to hit those throws. And some of them were contested as well. He I felt like more contested throws this week. If the silent rumors are true that one of the reasons he came to Ohio State is about the development that Ryan Day could give him versus what Georgia could give him, then yeah, it is scary to think what the next year could hold.
This isn't to arouse a debate of, well, is Dwayne Haskins better, or is J.T. Barrett better, or Braxton Miller, or Cardale Jones, or Bobby Hoying, or Joe Germain, or any of the quarterbacks that have played at Ohio State. I don't want to make this about who's better, who's worse. But I will say this. In my estimation, Justin Fields is the most talented quarterback to ever suit up for Ohio State. I don't know that he's going to be the best quarterback ever at Ohio State. It's too soon to be having that conversation. But he is the most talented. When you add in his arm strength, he's got an NFL arm, his accuracy, his poise, his touch, his reading the defense, what we've seen so far. But then you add in his running ability. He accelerates really quickly in and out of the pocket, as well as straight ahead especially. When you put all of those things together, I really think we're watching the most talented quarterback Ohio State has ever had, taking everything into account. Dwayne Haskins, I think, is the best true passer, but I think all of those abilities combined, Justin Fields is probably most talented, in my opinion.
Yeah, if he doesn't go down as both the most talented and the best, it will be, I think, on the mental aspect. If he can read coverages and adjust mentally the way Haskins could, then yeah, I don't see how he wouldn't surpass him. And keep in mind, Dwayne Haskins had to cement his legacy in 1 year. Justin's going to have 2 at least, barring any type of injury or setback. And Dwayne Haskins, he really became Dwayne Haskins the last several games of the year. So the field is all Justin's, as it were, where he can write his own legacy with the mental aspect of the game improving from here on out. And
Johnny, Garrett Wilson had the first of what will probably be at least 30 impressive high point catches at his career at Ohio State. Austin Mack had a few nice catches. Ben Victor is really playing consistently so far. We know all of the talent that Justin Fields has to throw to. We know that receiving core is really, really talented. But where Ohio State's offense will be, made or broken is going to be up front with the offensive line. And I thought that with a whole game under their belts, or at least 3/4 under their belts of the starting offensive line being in there and J.K. Dobbins playing a good 2 quarters plus out of that, I was really impressed with the Ohio State run game against a decent Cincinnati front seven that I wasn't sure they would run consistently against, and they did, and that's really encouraging. Even Master Teague got in there, had some really impressive carries there in the second half. If Ohio State can run the ball like that this season, then this Ohio State offense, the ceiling really is the limit for them.
Yeah, that offensive line looked fantastic. I'm trying to think of other performances that good. I think obviously last year's 39-62 game over Michigan was a great offensive line performance. I look back 2017 Nebraska, where we won by 230 points in Lincoln that night. I think those were great performances. I would like to take a stopwatch and go back and look at the film and see just how long Justin Fields had to throw on those passing downs. It really was great. J.K. Dobbins ran well, but he had a few holes that you could drive a truck through. Case in point, J.K. Dobbins, 8.3 a carry, Master Teague, 5.5 a carry. You don't get that with bad offensive line play. So if they can do that in Big Ten scheduling, then the sky's really the limit for this team.
I would be banging my head against the wall as an opposing defensive coordinator trying to scheme for this Ohio State team going forward, because last year we saw Dwayne Haskins almost never got pressured, and teams just gave up trying to because it wasn't worth it. They could blitz, and they still weren't getting to him, so teams stopped trying. But this Ohio State team, it's looking like they could have the same issue. You're not going to get to Justin Fields very often. And when you do, oh, by the way, he's so quick and he's so fast, he's just gonna miss you, and then he's still gonna get receivers open because he gets out of the pocket and throws so well on the run. So I'm not sure that there's a winning strategy for defending Ohio State if we keep seeing that development up front that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. The one team, to their own peril, last year did try the blitzing and the man coverage, and it didn't work out so well.
Would you like to name that team by name?
Well, it would be the Weasels up north that, again, they have their playbook and they just stick right to it. But, yeah, I think that will be the key is, if you can get some pressure on Fields, can he read it as well as Haskins could? If not, then really, I think, I don't know, what do you do? Just sit back and zone and make him drive 15 play drives on you. The defensive coordinators are really going to be in fits trying to figure out how you stop the guy. And not only that, Ryan Day hasn't even sprinkled in the QB run that much, for defensive coordinators to think about. Maybe they do load the box and take away our run game, and then we go Urban Meyer ball. Okay, we gain an extra blocker and let's run the quarterback. So this is really setting the stage for an offense that is going to be really hard to stop.
Well, and you mentioned everybody's favorite initialism, TTUN. It's really a tale of two seasons. I know it's just 2 weeks in, but it's a tale of two seasons when you look at where Ohio State's line is and where their offense is to where Michigan's offense is right now. They were struggling to get 3 yards a carry against Army on Saturday. And I'm not saying Army is a bad defense because they're not, but they're certainly comparable to the Cincinnati defense, and Ohio State had no problems running against Cincinnati. So Michigan's offense, and I want to talk about them a little bit more here in a few minutes, especially in the context of what they might see with Ohio State later in the year. But it's interesting because Michigan is kind of they're in a bad way offensively right now. They've got a system that doesn't have the personnel to suit it. They're trying to call plays that aren't even tailored to the quarterback, which is something they said they were going to do coming into the year. They really lack game-breaking speed on offense. Nothing against Zach Charbonnet, but he is not a home run hitter at running back. He's kind of as somebody said on Twitter, 3 yards and a cloud of pellets. Michigan's offense they're really struggling, and it's interesting to watch them relative to what we're seeing at Ohio State. There's like two different universes right now.
Yeah, all I can say is I thought Gaddis was going to open it up. I thought we had that, and legitimately that receiving core on paper, could be scary. I don't know. I mean, look, it's your second year with Shea Patterson. He's got some wheels. He's a good intermediate thrower. You have good receivers. You have maybe even subpar for Jim Harbaugh standards running back. So what else do you think you would do? I get it. Like you said, their offense is tailored for one way, but you mean to tell me with Jim Harbaugh's top 10 recruiting classes that on these teams, he can't line it up and go 4 and 5 wide and spread these guys out? They can't do it. I mean, that's just insane to me. So, okay, let's play Harbaugh ball. Oh, wow. That's his style, like you said, but 3 yards a carry. So it's like they refuse to try something else. So they do what they're good at, but they are not good at what they're good at. So I don't know where they go from here.
Johnny, I think it's an identity crisis because I think that they want to spread it out, but they know they don't have the playmakers to do that. They don't have the receivers that can burn you. They don't have the guys that can take a little pitch pass right behind the line of scrimmage and take it 80 yards. They don't have those kind of players. And at running back, they certainly don't have the backs to make plays in space. So I think it's a case where it's like they wanted to spread it out and open it up. And I'm not sure that Jim Harbaugh was actually comfortable with that, despite what he says. But maybe Josh Gaddis did want to do that. But I think they're having problems trying to find that balance because it's like they know they don't have the playmakers and they don't have the experience doing it but yet, they're just trying to stick with what's comfortable, and they're stuck in between right now. That's what I see when I watch them.
Yeah, and that very well may be, but like you just said, well, if you go hard one way or hard the other, it seems they don't really have the personnel to do either. And the defense takes a hit from what it was. So I'm not sure what is going to be the identity of the team. I would lean with that receiving core and Shea to opening it up. But, it's kind of hard to change the culture of a program in just one season. So you're right. It's an identity crisis of sorts. I'm not sure what the answer is for them. Obviously, with the talent on the roster, they can turn some things around, but I couldn't tell you what it looks like. If you say, okay, Michigan really turns it around, has a good rest of the year, okay, I mean, I could believe you, but I couldn't tell you what it would look like, how they would get there.
Well, Michigan has an uphill climb. They have got Wisconsin coming up after the bye week in 2 weeks. That Wisconsin team looks very balanced. They're tough defensively. They're balanced between a really good running game offensively and a passing game that suddenly looks formidable. Then you've got the Michigan State game in the middle of the schedule. That front seven defensively looks nasty for Michigan State. I'm still not sure about their offense. Their offense hasn't been very impressive early in the going, but their defense is really formidable. And then, of course, Ohio State. Ohio State is another team. We're going to talk about that team speed here in just a second. But you suddenly start to look at Michigan's schedule, and there are a lot of road bumps. And last year, I thought that they had the defense to get through those landmine games. I'm not sure that they have enough offense or the dominant defense combined to get through all of those.
No, well, you talk about their schedule. How about in late October, Penn State and Notre Dame back to back?
Yeah, right. I didn't even mention those two.
Yeah. So it's Penn State and Notre Dame back to back at Penn State. I think you might have to count on a whiteout. Anytime one of the bigger schools goes there, and home for Notre Dame. I don't know. I don't know the identity where they could beat Notre Dame, and just I don't know what Penn State is. But I got to ask you this. How jealous do you think Jim Harbaugh is watching what Wisconsin does? Efficient passing, tremendous running. Vanilla, but effective. I mean, it's like if Jim Harbaugh could unzip himself and be one person right now, you got to think it would be Paul Chryst.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like he's taken, and like you said, solid defense. He is. If you're going to run things kind of old school, that's definitely the way to do it, and not the way in which, like you put it. I really like the way you put it. Again, is caught somewhere in an identity crisis. I
want to ask you a real quick Wisconsin question. I wasn't intending to spend too much on, but since you mentioned them, I do want to ask you this: with the emergence of Jack Cohn playing as well as he is, does Graham Mertz ever actually get a start at Wisconsin when Cohn is not or when Cohn is healthy? Because he's playing really well. I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead because it's just 2 games against mediocre opponents, and if memory serves me correctly, Wisconsin fans were going gaga over Alex Hornibrook early in his career, and that didn't turn out so well. So I'm going to slow the hype just a little bit, but Jack Cohn looks really good. I'm not sure that Graham Mertz is ever going to get a chance to start over him if Cohn keeps playing this well.
Well, good news for him is free agency now in college football. That's the official hardship is, how was I supposed to know Jack was that good? That's literally what it's going to say when going in front of the NCAA. But no, it does remain to be seen. Obviously, the schedule hasn't been tough on them yet. Cold weather hasn't really set in on them yet. I think it would be hard to, after Graham Mertz gets a year of college coaching under his belt, being coached up by a Division I program, you just think with his talent that he could make his mark. You remember, Ohio State wanted Graham Mertz, so or at least was looking at him very closely. So. I would think he has to get a shot one way or another, but if not, like I said, the rules are more advantageous to a young man that would like to transfer.
So, Johnny, I I got this pointed out to me this weekend that I have been outspoken about thinking Michigan would beat Ohio State this year. And I have said that. I'm going to own that. And it's not that I want to waffle on this, but look, we're getting more data as the season goes along. More games are being played. Actually, when I first said that, no games had been played. So to be fair, I was making a prediction based off of just preliminary expectations. But we're starting to see games come in, and I have said that I was expecting Michigan to beat Ohio State. I'm not necessarily waffling on that, but look, if I'm comparing the two teams right now, Ohio State is suddenly looking like a lot better team, and that doesn't guarantee victory in a single game. We know that from past history with Ohio State and Michigan. But I will say this, the Ohio State game for Michigan and everybody on the schedule is suddenly looking a lot different because it looks like the return of the silver bullet defense. This is, I think, one of the fastest Ohio State defenses we've seen early in a year in a long, long time. We've seen dominant defenses before, but this team is flying to the ball, Johnny.
No, they really are. They really are. The zone defense keeps their eyes on the ball, and you're right, they are fast, man. I was looking at, some of the replays and some of, watching a little bit of the game. And it occurred to me, obviously Lane Kiffin figured this out in one half. And to his credit, he called a really nice second half in the first game. This is not a team you're going to go east to west on. It's not going to happen. You're not going horizontally across the field. They are too fast. When we go to that lineup, Kyle, where you have Baron Browning, Pete Werner, Malik Harrison, Sean Wade, Jeffrey Okuda, and anyone else back there in. I mean, name a back side of a defense that fast. I mean, I don't know if there are three linebackers, a starting linebacker unit, and I know Barron is rotational, but those three, I don't know if there's a linebacker unit as fast in the whole country as those three. I certainly don't think there's any that are all over 230 and two of them over 240 pounds that are that fast. So these guys, you're right, they absolutely do get to the ball. And I think you just somehow are going to have to schematically fool them because athlete for athlete, they're just going to be so hard for people to beat.
Yeah, I mean, they're not able to, the two teams that Ohio State has faced so far just have not been able to run against Ohio State. Michael Warren is a really good back for Cincinnati, and they could get nothing going in the ground game. And I really expect that that's going to be the same all season long. I don't see any teams running successfully, consistently against Ohio State. I really don't. But here's really the impressive thing. If you look at the first two games, I counted out of the 5 longest pass plays that they've given up so far, 4 of them have been seam passes. The other one was the one over Damon Arnett's head. He had a step on him. It wasn't terrible coverage, but he was a step behind. Not terrible. But the other 4 were seam passes where it was just barely over the linebacker and just under the safety. Now, for the defense that Ohio State has been playing, that's the weak spot of the defense. But it took, all 4 of these took perfect throws to be completed. If you're hoping for a perfect throw in tight on a very small seam like that against Ohio State defense, you're going to have a long day, especially with that pass rush back there when you got Chase Young bearing down on you. So if Ohio State continues playing the way we've seen in 2 weeks, I think this defense is fully back to what we expect to see at Ohio State.
Well, yeah, it is going to take those type of tight end, those seam routes to beat it. And like you said, maybe you do get behind Pete Werner, but if that's your bread and butter, then okay. So maybe we put Sean Wade or Brendan White in that position, and then can you make that throw? Maybe we start having Jordan Fuller jumping up on some of that, and then can you make that throw? And last year, for all the dysfunction, you could tell that Greg Schiano was an NFL coach because you could see wow, he's doing things that college defensive coordinators just don't do. Now it's not working out for us, but you can tell he can get complex. Well, all the talk this year was how about much more simple things were. Well, Kyle, we're still able to throw some complexities in a way that are simple to execute. Because how about the play where we blitz Sean Wade off the corner, drop Pete Werner to free safety, and have the safety come out and take Wade's man in coverage, which results in a strip sack for Shaun Wade. So not only do we have the personnel, sounds like we have coordinators smart enough to mix it up to where the offense it never knows what's coming.
That particular play was impressive too, because on that, if you notice, like they dropped Chase Young into zone pass coverage on that, and so they overloaded the ones after Cincinnati overloaded the one side. They dropped Chase Young back into coverage and had another guy in pass coverage. And so, and of course, when you have a guy like Chase Young, who's going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, it's a nice luxury to have that kind of athlete. So, yeah, you're right. It doesn't have to all be about being simpler. I don't think that all of the problems last year with the Ohio State defense boiled down to just being too complex. I'm sure that was a big part of it. But sometimes it's just a matter of getting guys thinking less, and then you can start, throwing things in as the season goes along.
Yeah, and I think even though that play looked complex, it was relatively simple, right? Hey, Sean, go get the quarterback. Hey, Jordan, go take his man. Hey, Pete, bail. Chase, drop back and get a pick like Steve Miller. So even though that was it looked like, what are they doing? You can still do that from a stance that's easy for players to execute.
Yeah, and to be certain, there are some things the defense still needs to improve upon. Like Chase Young, I have seen people try to compare him. Is he better than the Bosa's? And you can make the case. We could sit here and debate whether or not he's as good as the Bosa's pass rusher. He's certainly as good of an athlete on defense as Ohio State has ever had at that position. He's a freak athlete. Maybe in the long run he's even better than the Bosa's. I don't know. But there are things that he needs to work on, like his run defense. Several times I saw him out of position on runs where he came down the line a little too much. He didn't keep contained on the edge. So there are certain times where Chase Young can be even better, which that's actually scary when you think about it. For as good as he is, he's still got a lot of room for improvement. Yeah,
well, I don't. Yeah, and what do you do? It'll be interesting to see what an NFL staff can do with him, because they're a lot of times even better coaches, and they have more than just a few years to work with them. And yeah, he could get better in the run support. If you look at statistics and total tackles and tackles for loss, that's where Joey really separates himself from a Chase Young or even from his brother. And yeah, I think maybe the best comparison in a couple years to make to Chase Young will actually be Zach Harrison, because of skill set, length, and speed at the defensive end position. But if Chase puts it all together and he starts tackling running backs in the middle of the line, then I don't know what you do for the rest of the team. You just run to the other side of the field, I guess.
And we've got to give a shout out to Tyreek Smith for that sack on Saturday. That little duck under move he had for his first career sack. Corey swears he had one last year. It doesn't show up in the stats, and I'm not sure what game. I'm not sure what game he's talking about. Corey just could have an overactive imagination, but he swears Tyreek Smith had one last year. But officially, this was his first sack, and it was an impressive little swim move.
Oh, his get off on the line is great. You and I were sitting on the 50-yard line, Kyle, at the spring game, and we saw the potential there. And even in that, I think it was that same drive, he stuffed the run really nicely too on the exact same drive. So he's really coming along. You reminded me, Kyle, the defense playing this well, albeit the competition is lesser, but an athletic play is an athletic play. They're doing it without the slated started strong side defensive end and Jonathan Cooper. So there's a whole nother element that the defense could jump out into with him back.
You're absolutely right. We knew the interior defensive line was going to be really deep, and it has been. They're doing that without Taron Vincent inside. But Devon Hamilton, Tommy Tugiai, there are a lot of guys that are really stepping up and playing like we expected them to inside. But you're right. When you add Cooper on the outside with the emergence of a guy like Tyreek Smith, it really does bode well for this Ohio State defense. Johnny, so Ohio State opens this weekend. I'm sure you and Corey will talk more about this later in the week, previewing Indiana a little bit. But they're a 14-point favorite to open up against Indiana. I know people have said, well, this is a team that Ohio State has struggled with here the last several years traditionally, but I will point out, and I'm not saying they're going to do this, but I wonder if this spread is fool's gold or not, but I will point out Ohio State the last 2 years since Tom Allen took over for Kevin Wilson at Indiana, the Buckeyes have won by a combined 51 points. So I'm not sure that the past history of Indiana applies going forward to this series.
Yeah, they always seem to give us some struggle. You know, they play Michigan really tough.
Yeah.
Always do. And they give us something, you know, usually to think about. Last year, though, you wonder, you know, they played us tough for a couple quarters. But last year, I think we ended up winning comfortably, but still I think gave up like 26 points. But we know the defensive problems that we had last year. So I think, you know, 14 seems awful light. Even though, like you said, they can play us tough for a couple quarters, well, the end of the game doesn't warrant a 14-point spread. I don't know if it's Indiana's scary 10-point victory over Ball State that made for that spread. You know, they 52-0 blanked Eastern Illinois, but I don't know what it is. You know, the guys in Vegas are a lot smarter than I am, but, you know, it's home, noon for Indiana. I don't, you know, and Bloomington's not really a tough place to play. I don't know, especially not at noon. I don't know why that's only a 14-point margin.
Well, we will definitely have more on the Indiana game later in the week. Ross will be along on Wednesday. We'll kind of go back to what happened in the UC game and look ahead just a little bit to Indiana. And I'll have an Indiana preview with my man Galen Clavio. He's the host of Crimson Cast. They cover Indiana on the Rivals Network. So I'll have him later on this week to talk about the Indiana game. But Johnny, I do want to get into LSU just for a minute. So first, I assume that you watched the LSU-Texas game on Saturday, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It was a lot of fun.
So are we believers yet in this LSU offense? We've heard it so many times with LSU. It's like, well, if they just get a quarterback and they just change their offense. And then so many times we've been let down. This feels like the real deal finally.
Well, it certainly looks better than it ever has. The passing game, you know, granted they're playing a Big 12 defense, but Texas was one of the better Big 12 defenses last year. I don't know if that's is that a conundrum? Better Big 12 defense, like
tallest little person.
Yeah, but they certainly seem to be last year. But you know, the defense or the offense does it looks different. You know, they're finally able to use Jefferson. They you know they're actually calling pass plays a lot more. They're actually the running back doesn't look like, you know, as good as other LSU running backs of the past have been. So I have to think that I don't know if it is I don't know if you'd call it a spread them out, you know, legit down the field passing offense, but it's a lot better. I think you can comfortably say it is a lot better than what it has been.
So your favorite poll or your favorite rating system, the FPI, gives LSU gives LSU over 50% chance to make the playoff. Kevin Noon, publisher of Buckeye Grove, joked on Twitter. He called it the fraudulent power index.
I like it.
But
I like it.
Let's just take that as gospel for a second. Let's say LSU has over a 50% chance. It makes for some interesting conversation because suddenly Alabama then has to feel uncomfortable in the event that what if they do lose to LSU and LSU gets the Western SEC bid and Georgia gets the Eastern SEC bid? Is Alabama sitting there waiting to pounce over the loser, or do they get left out entirely, even if it's that one loss to LSU? You could see some interesting scenarios play out if we assume that LSU is the real McCoy here.
Yeah, I think you really can. I think it's so early for playoff talk, but it is my funnest. It is the most fun for me to talk about, I think, because of all the different scenarios. You know, this is the one wrinkle I have with LSU, and they now the passing game is finally there. I didn't think it would ever happen, but it looks like it has gotten there. It took, giving them an Ohio State quarterback and hiring a pro pass game coordinator to come in. But Kyle, was it just me, or all of a sudden that vaunted traditional LSU defensive line wasn't there? It looked like a lack of defensive line play besides in the red zone from both teams.
I wondered that too. I will say this. I will say this.
Think that maybe we just can't get both on the same team.
I will say this in defense of LSU. They did not get a lot of pressure on Sam Ehlinger, and they didn't stop the pass very well at all. But Texas only threw, surprisingly, this would shock people, they only threw for 7 yards an attempt. They had a lot of yards in aggregate, but they didn't have a lot of big yardage. It's just the number of passes they threw. And I will compliment, I think part of that was LSU just stuffed the run, and Texas never felt like they could run on LSU. And I think that kept them having to pass more often, and they put up a lot of yards in doing it, but it wasn't real effective. So I will say LSU's front seven did not do a lot in terms of getting to the quarterback on passing situations, but I did feel like they dominated the game, keeping Texas from being able to run it successfully.
Yeah, that could be part of styles and game plays can manipulate things. And obviously losing White at linebacker changes the way a front seven will play. But looking at their schedule, you bring up a good point about their chances of the playoff. Yeah, all of it seems, besides Alabama, which we know you can lose one game to an Alabama, and how the SEC is viewed, they could still get in. All their other games are all at home. They have A&M at home. They have Auburn at home. And they have Florida, which I don't think Auburn and Florida are that good, but both of those are at home as well.
So the other thing I want to point out here before we wrap it up is I will say this. Like, I've seen a lot of these teams. Alabama, I think, is playing to expectations. I think Clemson has mostly played to expectations. Their offense, I didn't think was impressive against Texas A&M, as others have mentioned. They were good. They weren't great. LSU obviously played really well against Texas. Oklahoma has looked pretty good against two very bad teams, but they have looked the part. I will give them credit. I will say out of this top 6 teams, including Ohio State, Georgia is the one that I have not been impressed with so far. They have had no passing game whatsoever. You can tell they're suffering, like Michigan, they're suffering from a lot of elite type of speed and playmakers offensively, and that's really hurt them, I think. And their defense hasn't been totally great considering the competition, Vanderbilt and Murray State. So I would say out of those 6 teams, I think Georgia's the most susceptible I've seen so far.
That very well may be. I even had a Georgia fan talk to me after week 1, and they basically said what you said about their passing game. They were not impressed. They did like their other running back there beside a Swift, but the lack of competition and then lack of wide receiver skills is out there makes you wonder if maybe that was a little bit of lightning in a bottle, fool's gold to that UGA's year to challenge might have passed already. I know it's premature, but you got to have a run game and a passing game to compete now, and it looks like maybe that's beyond them.
Well, Ohio State, Indiana, coming up on Saturday. We'll talk more about it all week, both here on the Unscripted Ohio podcast on Wednesday and Friday, as well as Johnny and Corey over on the Scarlet and Gray podcast Tuesday and Thursday. Johnny, is Corey going to show up for work this week?
He better. I'm not going to let it out of the bag, but we have a good interview lined up for this week. Let's just put it this way. If you know the Silver Bullet history well, you should know who this guy is.
I know the answer, and I also will not spoil it, but I will validate Johnny's comment that it is an impressive interview, and you're going to be very happy to listen to it. I know I'm going to. I'll be very intrigued to hear what he has to say.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me on, Kyle, and I hope you guys listen in. I appreciate it.
Did I give away too much by saying it's a he?
Only if you believe in that sort of thing.
I may have narrowed it down a little too much. I gave you a big clue there. It is a he. Well, that's going to wrap it up here for Unscripted Ohio. Thank you for listening to us. Be sure to listen to Johnny and Corey over on Scarlet and Great tomorrow, Tuesday, and Thursday. I'll be back on Wednesday and Friday. Chris Drew will be back with episode number 2 of the Dog Days podcast. He's going to have his hands full talking about what happened with that Browns nightmare in game number 1 against the Titans. And Shane Larson, always going to be enjoyable, episode number 3 of Gridiron Game Time coming up on Thursday. All of that here on the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher. Catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. That's going to do it for us. I'll be back on Wednesday. Johnny and Corey will be back tomorrow. Have a good week, everybody.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.